just send it right into it. And just keep going. So it's just a pretty. I'm literally just gonna pass it and say, let me know when you're done.
My reputation was I've never spoken here at all, so.
Well, I'm just not here for tonight.
I'm just here. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's been a while. Time to review it.
We're really excited for this project, so. we'll wait here a couple of minutes.
Well, but I.
Okay, I got 5:15, and we're going to call the Planning and Budget Committee meeting to order. Ms. Schulp, can we have roll call, please?
Anderson.
Here.
Miller.
Present.
Wong.
Here.
I have Wong in the boardroom and Anderson and Miller virtually.
Okay. Approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried. Move on to 1D, approval of the minutes from last meeting, which was on September 1st.
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from September 1st.
Second.
Okay, the minutes, motion to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried. That takes us to item 2A, which is the Fruzen cafeteria furniture. And we will have Ms. Smith and Mr. Winters presenting material. So you have the mic.
So this is part of the fund balance, the excess fund balance that has been approved by DPI. At Gaston, we needed to replace the cafeteria tables there because of mechanical issues. So what we've decided to do is take half the Fruzen cafeteria tables and upgrade the half of the cafeteria tables at Fruzen to what we're currently doing is at Cunningham and at Aldridge, we put in more age-appropriate furniture. So we have some high tops, we have some booths, so it looks a little bit more collegiate, as you will, but using half the cafeteria tables that are existing already. You'll notice on the bid sheet that we did not go with the lowest bid, and that's partially because we've had some issues with them once before when they bid by not coming in at the right time, where we ended up having to assemble a lot of that furniture ourselves. And it was in the night spot. It was quite a while ago, but we decided to go with the next bid that we knew was more appropriate for what we needed.
Okay, any questions from committee members? Do we have a motion then?
I would like to move that we approve. I'm just looking for the motion language. I'm on a different device here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I'd like to move that we approve the cafeteria furniture bid and it looks like, am I reading this right, that it's in the amount of, is this the 97,000 number?
70,836.78.
Oh, there it is. Oh, the CJ. Okay, gotcha. In the amount of 70,836.78 cents.
Second.
Okay, it was a motion and second on that. Any further discussion?
There is, yes. I just had one, and I kind of, it's been a while since you brought this up, but I understand, you gave great context for this. I'm just hoping that in the future, when we approve things that are like particularly like Fund 50 and things that are very specific, if we could get a document, I know Sean, you would put together like a 10-year facilities plan. I would really appreciate just the context ahead of time if we could see that document and where each of these projects falls. So we can see, without having to like drill into it every single time, like what is the priority, what is the opportunity cost of that priority, where does that fit in with the grand scheme of things? And like, tonight it seems pretty straightforward, but I'm just curious if in the future we could get kind of that context.
I can do something like that. This project here, though, did pop up. It was not in the 10-year project. This popped up through conversations with the principal and Dawn Smith and I going over looking at the furniture at Gaston. But yeah, we can absolutely go over the 10-year plan with you again. Absolutely.
Well, and I mean, just like, for example, like with this one, so like if we had like the 10-year plan, you could have put a note on there that, and just, this is fine. Like, you know, it makes sense. It's obviously something we need to do because we're going to get kids in buildings at some point and we need them to have safe places to be. So fine, but like, I'm just curious, so like if that could be like, okay, we were going to do this, but now we're actually going to prioritize this and here's our rationale, would save a lot of time. And I think it would help us as a board feel like we're making like better informed decisions. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, so you took the time to put that together. It's a beautiful document. I think we should use it more. But thank you so much for
Absolutely.
that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I did have a question. Talks about age-appropriate furniture, and when Frusen was built, was this not considered back then, I take it? Is that accurate?
No, it's just, you know, in the world we live in right now, we're looking for a more dynamic cafeteria furniture, something a little more relaxed versus the typical. Here's all these tables. You sit right next to each other. With this age group, we found that if you give them a more relaxed seating arrangement, there tends to be a lot less issues, and they also tend to enjoy the atmosphere more. This really did come from a need at Gaston to replace their cafeteria tables, and then Dawn had the great idea because we wanted to upgrade half of Frusen's tables, not the whole thing, just half, and for the older kids at Frusen, and we were going to keep the other half of the tables for the younger students. So this really helps diversify our seating arrangements, just like we did at Eldridge and at Cunningham.
And with the furniture, and I appreciate what Board Member Miller had mentioned about the continuing to bring that forward, because as we do have a changing board, I think it's important to understand what the previous plans have been and what you've laid out previously.
Absolutely.
But along that line, you know, is there additional furniture that's going to be coming up? And I guess that's probably something for the feasibility plan going forward to say, yes, here's what we're seeing. Because if we're seeing this at one school, you know, is there a time frame? I'm guessing you bought furniture at Gaston at the same time you bought perhaps at some other schools. And I don't know. And maybe it was all purchased at the same time there. But just to keep us all on the same page.
Yeah, and in a lot of these schools, when we did the 2012 referendum, a lot of the furniture was kept from the previous schools. So the furniture that actually at Gaston is not from 2012, it's much older. So yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you about bringing forward that document to help everybody, I guess, have an easier time knowing where we want to be a year from now, a month from now. So, yep,
I
absolutely.
think if we could have that even in the library, that would be helpful, so that even the public could have it and access it along with all the other documents.
Oh,
we have.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion from the committee members? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of to approve CJ and A's response to the School District of Beloit's Frozen Cafeteria Furniture RFP in the amount of $70,836.78 to be moved to the board, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next topic, 2B, is BMHS Kitchen Freezer RFP.
This is another fantastic project that we're bringing forward to you. What it is we have another phase in our high school kitchen, our high school kitchen updating. Sorry. We have another phase in our high school kitchen updating, which will bring some stability to our cooler and freezer platform at the high school. Right now, our high school has a freezer that is 25 years old. We've had numerous issues with this box. The calls at 1 o'clock in the morning that the freezer broke down many times. We are also looking at updating the location where the freezer is going to go. Right now, the freezer is at the end of a hallway, and we want to replace the original freezer from 1950, which was made out of concrete, replace that with a brand new box, brand new compressors, putting it in a location which is more conducive to the staff grabbing product, but also we plan on countersinking the box. Right now, we are loading material into the freezer via a ramp, and it is far from safe. We are constantly adjusting, constantly reschooling. There are times when this ramp won't even work. We just take it completely off. The box will literally be the same height as the new floor, the new tile floor that we will be putting in. And believe it or not, we will also be taking out a phone booth from 1950 in this nice location. And I do not turn it into Superman at this location, at that phone booth. So, and as part of this project, we will, where the old spot where the freezer is, we're going to turn it into much needed dry storage. And it basically, we are going to finish the room. We're putting a ceiling in, we're putting some drywall up, and we're putting a door in. Basically, in a nutshell. And also, as part of this project, we will be finishing off another storeroom, which we use to house our catering equipment. This room is, again, from 1950, has the pumpkin block walls. There is not a ceiling, and it is not a sanitary spot for us to put our equipment. Every time we use any equipment out of the catering room, we've got to wash it up, bring it all through. It's a fantastic project for us to really put the jewel in our kitchen. The RFP went out last month. We received 3 quotes, and the lowest quote we received was from Clovercar in the amount of $117,400, which is within the estimated range that we thought this project would come back at. One more note as part of this project. Right now, if the power goes out at the high school, so does the condenser for the current freezer and the condenser for the current cooler. As part of this project, we will be hooking the new condenser for the cooler, the new condenser for the freezer, up to our backup generator. So we will not lose thousands and thousands of dollars worth of product. Any questions?
Any questions from
I-
committee members?
Sorry, Chair Wong. I just had a quick question. And I apologize if I missed this. I was trying to jot down some notes. Did you, could you speak to, if you haven't already, and I apologize, like, is there an energy efficiency? Like, is there a savings at all? And I'm specifically interested if there's a savings with hooking it up to the backup generator, because I know like turning things off and on can be like a big energy suck and things like that. Could you speak a little bit more to what the energy usage impact and maybe cost might be?
Well, you know, there will be substantial energy savings because we're going from a box that was designed 25 years ago and another box that is made out of concrete. The energy savings is not did not drive this project, albeit substantial. And quite honestly, I didn't even look into the energy savings due to the fact that regardless of how much money we're going to save, this freezer is not long for this world. And really, it is about what brings us a stable platform for both the cooler and the freezer. Essentially, with the new condensers, we should easily get another 10 years out of these condensers. And I can tell you, the condensers of today's world are so much more energy efficient than 25 years ago. And again, we are dealing with the original freezer, which is made out of concrete. There's a reason why we don't do that anymore.
I really appreciate that, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I understand you've got something that needs to, with some urgency, be replaced. I'm just hopeful, like, you know, I think something that I hear from folks about in the community is like a lot about the budget and cost. So people who are both concerned about our carbon footprints and energy kind of environmental costs, and also folks who are concerned about, like, you know, how are we budgeting and how are we being wise with our district dollars, would like to probably hear, as we go forward with approving things like this, like what cost savings and what energy efficiencies might be found in these new plans. So that's just maybe another thing to keep in mind for future stuff. But like, I totally get that this is like, oh my God, we need a freezer. So thank you. I appreciate, again,
Absolutely.
sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I appreciate you entertaining my question, and maybe that's just something to look forward to for the next.
Absolutely, and
item.
that's an awesome point. Awesome point, thank you.
Mr. Winters, these are Fund $50 as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
So once again, these are funds that we receive from federal, or is it state?
I can let Dawn.
State and federal.
State and federal. And these are dollars that we receive. Why do we receive these?
This is a reimbursement.
Can
that
you speak into the mic,
this-
please?
This is a reimbursement that you get from the National School Lunch and the National School Breakfast programs.
Okay.
So
And-
we have an excess fund balance because obviously we're feeding a lot of children. So now when they came to us and said, you have $900,000 that you need to spend by June 30th, we had to put together a plan.
But this is a plan that we typically have to, and a lot of this has to do with the status of our district
Correct.
based on demographics. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not to say that this is going to go away next year, and we can't bank on it, but when we do have it, it's necessary that we need to continue to look at wise ways, which you have done over the years, to spend these dollars. So while it is taxpayer dollars, I'm not going to dispute that, it's also money that if we don't use it, that we won't have it again, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, and Mr. Wong, that's a very good point. As a district, we try hard to take care of the issues before the issues take care of us. So we want to change this freezer on our terms, not on the emergency basis, which always adds extra money.
And I've always appreciated with the way you take care of, I would call them your buildings, even though they're not your buildings, but you treat them like they're your own, and I appreciate that, Mr. Winters. Board Member Megan, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, without being too redundant, point out that, with the Fund 50, it would still be really good to see again, like how that fits into the whole spectrum of plans, because I think it would be helpful for us as a board, but also for community members, like to see what are we foregoing? And so we can say like, well, yeah, you know, $170,000, a lot of money, but it's going to affect more kids if we do it this, you know what I'm saying? Like it's going to have a greater impact to make this choice versus this choice. And that's the thing. I mean, we always have probably an infinite number of things to repair, replace, and to provide. We just want to make sure that, you know, we want to be wise with our dollars, right? So the taxpayer dollars can be spent in the way that's most effective, you know, for our kids in our community. So thank you again for entertaining that. And I just wanted to clarify, yeah, I get that it's 150 and we have to spend it on this, but it's good to have kind of that context too.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it is important that, you know, I think as much as we say it's taxpayer dollars, and when it's Fund 50, and there's like these other funds, I think Fund 80 is another one, that, you know, these dollars have to be used. And why, you know, obviously we want to do it in the best way, and I know that you've done a good job over the years, Mr. Winters, of taking care of the buildings, so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Long.
Okay, do we have any other questions or discussions? If not, can we entertain a motion?
All right, well, I don't want to be a mic hog here, folks. I was just going to move to approve to the full board the proposal or the RFP for the freezer in the amount of $117,400.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving to move to the full board the approval of the Clovercar construction bid for $117,400 for the high school kitchen freezer project, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, board members, for your continued support.
The next topic is the food truck presentation. And I think we have a number of people that are willing to chip in on this one. And I know there's a presentation for all those that are tuned in. I would encourage you to pull up the data on board docs, the proposal, or follow along too.
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Beth Ann England. I'm the district manager for Aramark K-12 food service for Wisconsin. And I think you already know Jared, food service director. And Dawn's going to be running the PowerPoint for us just because to not mess up here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Don. All right, well, first off, I want to wish everyone a happy school board week. I want to echo Dr. Keyser's email this morning in regards to stating that the students benefit every day from the leadership and vision of our school board, so I just want to thank you all. Also, I want to appreciate for you guys to allow us to come back today to give you a little bit more of a comprehensive, detailed plan on the food truck project. So I want to take a minute here on this first slide just to kind of bring you back to the original idea for the food trucks, which was thought up by Dawn Smith over a year ago, along with Beth Ann, and give you the idea around it and explain the reasons why. So at its root cause, the main idea is to build participation within the district, to feed kids more meals, alleviate menu fatigue, and to create excitement. In addition to that, we can provide additional resources for extracurricular activities. We'd stay within NSLP to make sure that it's a reimbursable meal, provide additional fundraising opportunities, and also provide an academic aspect to it by working with the home ec department and figuring out a learning facility for the students. Okay. So I think what's important next, and what I took from the full board meeting was, how are we measuring our success? We talked about what metrics and we talked about all of that, but I think what's important is we talk about how are we measuring these successes. And I think this is extremely important, that at its root level, low-income students that eat breakfast and lunch have significantly better overall diet quality than those who don't. So at its core, feeding kids leads to better success at schools. So now that we've talked about the why, let's talk about why now, okay? So this is just a recap from the last meeting. The district has an excess Fund 50 balance of over $900,000. The food trucks would be paid through this excess fund balance, and it can only be used for food service. It's been approved by the DPI. I know we've talked about this in the past, but it's a 4 to 5 month process, so we're not looking until March. And again, just to recap, it is owned by the school district and licensed through Aramark. Beth Ann.
So I'm sure, as Dawn and Sean were just presenting, these are the other recent food service projects that relate to Fund 50. We just wanted to make sure that all the ones kind of proposed in 2020 were at least discussed, and where the 2 food trucks proposed fit into this project. So you have under Fruzen, we have the cafeteria furniture purchase, which was discussed tonight. The hydroponic gardens, 2 have been purchased and 6 are to be determined. And then, of course, we have our food truck proposal tonight, ice machine purchases, and then bento boxes with lids to replace the open trays once students are back in buildings, and then hand washing sinks. So we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So as it relates to the food trucks, this is the timeline. So a very simplified timeline. We have the planning, conception, requesting of bids that actually happened last school year. So Dawn and I have had a number of discussions about this when she was on the Aramark team about planning and what this looks like. We have a number of different food trucks in Aramark. So across in the K-12 line of business, we had a lot of case studies. And we've talked to a lot of other general managers and district managers about how it works in their districts. And we're going to present some of that data to you tonight. And then, of course, we have budget planning committee approval, which is this, the Board of Education approval. And then we will place the order for the food trucks. And then we have a naming contest, which we will look forward to in January. Then, like Jared said, we'll receive the trucks in about March of 2021. And then kickoff event once we receive the trucks. Okay, so our first case study, really want to talk about Camden, New Jersey. So this case study is a very similar district, which I thought was very important to present to you tonight. So they have 9,500 students enrolled, which is of course a little bit larger than Beloit, but they are also 100% CEP. And I thought that was very important to present as a similar case study in comparison to some of our other districts that we have that also have food trucks, which are more affluent districts that are not CEP.
Excuse me, could you, I know that most of us are in the world of education, but
Yes.
the acronyms, could you make sure that you explain what those are for the public?
Absolutely. So CEP is the Community Eligibility Provision, which means that 100% of the students are free for free meals. Yep. And this truck that they have in Camden, now this is just a graphic of their truck. They serve about on average an additional 100 meals per day. What we're presenting is 2 trucks so that we could target 100 meals per day from each truck, resulting in approximately 1,000 extra meals per week. Okay.
Thanks, Beth Ann. I think what's important now that we talk about is let's touch base on the different types of services that you see here. So on the left-hand side, you see SFSP, which is summer feed, and then the community meals. So that's currently what we're in right now during this moment, as well as during our summer months. As you can see, anyone 18 and under can participate. Let me make sure that say this clear, just like you did, that during all of these, both SFSP and the school breakfast program, it's 100% free. It's just a matter of how we're documenting the students as they come up. Currently, right now, it's just a tally, and anyone 1 to 18 can get meals. But as we get into the school year, assuming we get back and students are back in school, it's just a different way that we keep track of the students that are coming through. But I want to reiterate that regardless of which program it is 100% free. Okay. So, probably spent a good week diving through and getting an extensive amount of time pinpointing where our students live. So as you can see from here, what we try to do is all that purple cluster areas are where all of our students live. All of the red little houses are schools that you can see from there, and then the food trucks. So as you can see, there's 5 locations on the east and there's 5 locations on the west. On the board docs with the additional information that was sent out, it dives a little bit deeper into each of those clusters and those groups of people that will help us determine where we felt like the best locations, where to put it, to make sure that we can maximize and make sure that we're serving as many kids as we possibly can. So under the SFSP, so the summer feed, kind of like we're doing right now, as well as community meals, these are the 5 locations on the west and the east that you saw from the previous slide where those food trucks were. So we tried to pick locations that were public locations where it was easily accessible and closest to the biggest clusters of the students and where they live in this community. And then the next slide is back to the point of when we eventually get back to school, here are the locations that we'd look to service throughout the district. As you can see, all of these are schools. And so what we would try to do is to make sure that we're continuously utilizing these trucks. We would look to take one truck each day to one of those locations to make sure we're maximizing and utilizing the trucks to its fullest.
If we have questions, should we ask them as we go, or should we?
It doesn't matter. We're almost to the end. We thought we'd kind of go quick, and then you guys could ask all the
Okay,
questions you want.
thank you.
All right, so communication plan. Our plan for communication and marketing and to let the community know about these trucks is really to do a kickoff event. So I know that in past we've done a summer food service kickoff event, and I thought that would be a really nice way. Some community members are already aware of the kickoff events. So we would do a kickoff event to introduce the trucks to the community. We could utilize the district website or Twitter to promote the location of the trucks. And then also posting the truck schedules ahead of time, keeping the schedule as consistent as possible so that people are aware and have access to the trucks and know where they're going to be and where they expect them to be. And then that photo you see is just a screenshot from Twitter. The Nosh and Nomad is a truck in Chandler, Arizona, which is kind of at the end of the case studies. But it's just an example, posting a photo and using some hashtags for, to try to drum up some excitement with the students and reach some of the secondary students that have devices and are on Twitter and looking at this kind of stuff. So that's our generic communication plan. And then the naming contest. So this is kind of fun. Naming a food truck is going to be, I think it's going to be really fun for the district. Naming both food trucks. So each school is going to submit one name to the food service department food service committee. And once we have all the names compiled, then we can put it to a vote. And so I have some examples here of ones that, we as a team came up with, but we would love to kind of garner community support to help name the food trucks. We think that's really fun. And then the last thing I have is just some examples of success. So this is the food truck in Chandler, Arizona. It's called the Nosh and Nomad. This is their little Twitter handle. And again, like I said, they post photos all the time, and they'll even have like principals, if that's a thing in your district, to post on Twitter and tag the location of where the trucks are going to be. As Jared was saying, in the summer months, anyone under 18 can join us for free. So it's not necessarily just school district students. It's really anyone in the community. Round Rock ISD is in Texas. It's in the Austin area, and they have a Rockin' Fresh Eats truck that they utilize. So there's some pictures there. And then the last one is Greater Clark in Indiana, and that's called 812. And that's just a picture. Actually, that's outside of their public library in the summer months. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Okay, any questions from committee members?
I have a couple, just little quick ones. I just wanted to clarify on your the page where you were talking about the communication. I was just curious, is there a reason why we wouldn't use Skyward as a way to communicate? So, we can kind of do those blasts, especially as this gets going. Sometimes people don't check the website. Some people don't have access to the internet or consistent access to the internet, or they're like saving up all their internet for distance learning. I know like we've had some issues with that in our household. So would there be a reason we wouldn't do like the text and phone call blast?
No, that's a wonderful idea. We absolutely would utilize Skyward.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know it. I didn't see it in the presentation, so I'm going to ask about that. Where's another one? Okay, and then a really quick thing that just came to mind now, so I apologize for not asking earlier. So with the transportation piece, I know March, well, with the weather we have, we don't know if we're getting blizzards in March or not. So if there were, for some reason, a barrier for a child or a family to get to the food truck, like let's say Horace White Park or whatever, I just grabbed one, would we still be able to utilize the services that we're using now to do like delivery? I know we have some folks who are transportation or ability limited who are utilizing some kind of like a delivery service for the current lunch program. would that still be on the table, or like what is the impact of making sure this is accessible, right, to all children and families?
Well, to your first point, yes, this is in addition. This is not going to take away our already hotline calls that we get that we're delivering meals to. So currently, right now, in the last 2 weeks, we've absolutely blown up, which is absolutely fantastic because really at the end of the day, our job is to make sure our kids are getting fed. And if those children aren't able to get to our 7 serving sites, we want to be able to get to them. So we've been able to partner with the Durham bus service, and we're providing well over 350 meals a day to kids that are in need to their physical homes. This would be in addition to what we're already doing. So if children for some reason wouldn't be able to get to those 10 locations that we kind of have pointed out, we absolutely would still continue to deliver meals to the homes as well. So it's an addition, and it's not an addition with a subtraction.
Awesome. So just to clarify, because I want to make sure I understand. So like if would my kiddo who maybe like already relies on that Durham partnership, which is outstanding that we're doing that, by the way, would that child be able to access the hot meal if they wanted to? So like, okay. So yeah. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson or Board Member Anderson, do you have any questions or comments?
I have a couple.
Oh, did he?
So, what's the expecting carrying cost of actually having the food trucks? So, like, how much is it going to expect to cost us per year for these?
That's a great question. I don't have that information right now. In terms of if you're talking about the insurance coverage, gas, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't have that information readily available right now, but can get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great because then at least then we have now a plan on like so next year when we go to the budgeting and stuff, we know like, hey, this is how much money we'll have to kind of set aside to help maintain it. Another question I have is, so these other districts that you gave us example of, how long have they had these trucks for?
Did you want to answer and then?
Board Member Anderson, this is Joanne Armstrong. I just wanted to reiterate, the funds to carry the cost will continue to be Fund 50 costs. So the fund is a self-supporting fund at this point. We have continued as we have this excess food balance. So it is not going to be a cost that we will be looking at in our regular operating, but we can definitely get those costs for you, but it's not going to be taking anything from our operating funds that are used for our classrooms.
Well, the main thing was I was trying to think of like, okay, so just planning out on how we're going to use the money in Fund 50 for that side of it. But
Yeah.
did you guys ever, did you ask about how long these districts have had these trucks?
Yes.
So
So
far?
I know for sure the one in Chandler has been around for 2 years. And I believe the one in Greater Clark County has been around for 2 or 3 years. They're all very recent. But I would say within the last 5 years. The one in Camden, I think, is only a year old.
Okay. So they've all had really good experiences with them so far?
They have, absolutely. They've seen a lot of success with them. Like I said about the Camden one, I think is the most relevant to compare to because it's also 100% free and they utilize it in the summer months and during the school district, in the normal school year. And they've seen great success with it. And on top of that, I think just in general as a community, it drums up some excitement. I mean, it really can be used for a number of different things. Like I know Jared presented that it can be used for, fundraisers or even like an incentive for positive behavior at certain schools or something like that. It can be a really positive, fun way to engage students in school food service, which can sometimes kind of be kind of boring. So it's kind of a fun, progressive way to drum up some excitement.
All right. And then the last question I have for you guys. So typically, how long do places usually hold on to a food truck before they start looking at, should we be replacing this?
Sure. I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but we can certainly look at that and get back to you. We would be purchasing these trucks new. They're constructing them for us, so I would assume that they would have a long enough life,
Yeah, say,
20 years?
yeah, 15
Yeah.
to 20 years from what it sounds like. But we can definitely get that information from our supplier that would be looking to go through.
Yep.
Yeah, we can get that immediately.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions. I know that there's other questions out there from other board members. We will entertain those, but I do want to be careful because this is a committee meeting. And if we have too many board members on, that I think somebody could argue and say that this is a board meeting. So we do want to be careful about for open records laws. So, but my questions are, one of them is, as far as the distribution, fairness of distribution for, when I look at the map that you provided us on your presentation, I think it was slide 12, you know, there's certain areas when you have 500 or 600 students in that area, and you had said that the truck can deliver 100 meals per day, per truck.
So we're not delivering the meals.
Or I mean, just preparing, I mean.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So how are those orders, is it just they come up to the truck and say, I want to have the meal of the day, and then they show up and they stand in line and get that? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So just, I mean, it'd be the same as any other food truck. You just kind of line up. There's no pre-ordering or anything like that.
Right.
And then we'd have a window where we serve from, in terms of a window of time, that we serve from.
Right.
And we'd be open for that duration.
And I guess the concern, and maybe you understand where I'm coming from here, is that what happens when you have 150 kids that are lined up and there's 100 meals?
Yeah. We'll serve them.
Okay.
Yes.
We have the ability, so our metric was 100 would be deemed successful.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that we're only going to be able to provide 100 meals. We'll be able to provide an infinite amount of meals for however many students come.
Yeah, so I did talk with the general manager in the greater Clark County, and I asked her, what was the busiest day that you had? You know, just in terms of, did you go to a park? How many kids can you actually serve on this? And she gave me a number that was about 185. And
Okay.
she said it was a long line, but she goes, we did it. It's really about the capacity, and I think our food truck is actually the same design. The one that we proposed is the same design as the one in greater Clark,
Okay, great.
in the inside storage capacity. Yeah.
Good to hear. Very good to hear. One other question I had was actually a couple of them. One, if there's, well, this one's, that's just, if I'm guessing that, assuming there's going to be menus in Spanish there, that probably goes without saying that's going to happen. What about, and this was a question, as you brought up these other trucks, and you have other examples out there, what are other examples that they're using these trucks for outside of the regular meals? You know, such as you had fundraisers on there. Do you have examples of that you can share with us?
We could certainly supply that, I mean, after this meeting. I have a number of examples.
Okay.
But I think the partnership between, you know, Aramark holding the license, but it's the school district's truck. So as long as we have someone who's licensed and has that food service certificate, the opportunities are endless.
Okay. And that's great, good to hear. I would highly recommend putting together a list before the full board meeting, letting us know exactly what this has been used for, if there's specific examples as far as how they utilized it. Is there a positive cash flow that they're seeing, or how are they utilizing those dollars? You know, get as much detail as possible. That would be extremely helpful for us.
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Levy, you had a question?
Thank you, Chairman Wong. Before I start my questions, I was under the impression that board members can attend and ask questions at any committee meeting. We just can't vote unless we're a member of that committee. Is that accurate?
That's a great question. I believe that is correct, but I'll double check.
Thank you so much. My first question and kind of a concern is that on your measuring success slide, and I'm just paraphrasing for the interest of time, but your three things are to reduce food insecurity, to improve dietary intake, and meeting children's nutritional needs. So unless the premise is that we're not currently doing that, I'm not sure how those success measures are specific to this project. Is there something I'm missing?
No, I think in general, about access and increasing participation in the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, the Summer Food Service Program. It's really just about increasing participation and adding another avenue for access.
Okay, thank you for that context. A suggestion for when you present to the full board, if you could have what our access numbers are, since we, the students in our district are eligible to everyone to receive a free lunch. If you could provide those numbers to what our typical access is when we were in school, because at some point we will be back in school, and I think that would be very helpful for this project. I thought that one of the main reasons for having this truck was to have food delivered to our students, a hot meal. But it seems like with the 5 stops that as a student, I still need to get to the truck. Are you at all concerned about the barrier that might place on our students getting a hot meal?
So is that are you talking about during like this COVID and when we're shut down, or are you talking about during when we're back in session, or both? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
No, mainly focusing on our current condition. If this is something that persists after our food trucks are in use, I am concerned that the reasoning for getting these trucks may not be a viable option if our students still need to get to the trucks and the trucks are not capable of coming to the students.
So in the current state where we are delivering the meals to the homes, that will continue. That hotline will still be open. And then we would park these trucks at the designated stops. And like we mentioned, we can serve 180 tops probably, students at each site. But they would be required to come to the truck for the meal.
So when you say the hotline is still available, is that food from the truck, or is that like the current lunch, cold lunch from Aramark?
That's the current cold lunch that's coming from the Aramark that the Durham Bus Service is helping us to provide to these students at their homes.
Yep.
Thank you. And then just a couple more questions. The Fund 50 amounts, since those amounts aren't guaranteed, how are we sure that we're going to have funding to cover the upkeep and expense annually for these trucks once they're in service?
Sure.
Sorry, Board Member Levy, this is Ms. Armstrong again. You can't really always bank on this, but the Fund 50 has not had a deficit budget or nonprofit making in, I will say, in my knowledge, the last 6 years for certain, and I would venture to say it's been even longer. When we went into the CEP, the Community Eligibility Provision, we have been improving our meals. We've offered new fresh fruits enhancements that the district has been utilizing money out of Fund 50 for that, continuing to upgrade our meals. So this is not necessarily a new problem for us. We've continued to do these projects. If you look back in your additional information that we handed, we've actually been doing projects out of Fund 50 since 2005 that Ms. Smith put into that packet for you. So I feel very confident in saying that we would have the money to be maintaining these trucks and those operating costs because we have a proven record of having those funds available for over 15 years.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Armstrong, for providing that context. When this is presented to the full board, it would be really helpful to budget out what those amounts for upkeep and insurance, et cetera, may look like. And to plan ahead, and since we are expecting to spend this amount, how that might impact us on opportunity costs and projects that we have been doing. I forget the year you just said, but some of those may not be able to continue to be done if we are diverting money for the upkeep of the trucks. And then my last kind of comment / concern is that if you are saying that 200 meals will be served per day, that's less than 3% of our students. So I just want us to keep in contact of how many of our students, if we're in our current situation, would really have access to this. And then one thing that caught my attention was you said that that would be an extra 1,000 meals a week, which is kind of a false equivalency because it's not that the students would not be fed otherwise. So it's not an extra it's not extra meals. And then the one thing that I'm still concerned about is that we haven't heard how this project is attached to student achievement as requested. So when you present to the full board, that would be an important component that I would be looking for, would be student involvement and how this project would be connected to student achievement. Thank you so much.
Let's see, Board Member Miller.
Thank you. Actually, Board Member Levy touched on one of my reasons for the question mark, which is just, I'll just iterate that when you present to the full board, it'll just be helpful. Like, I'm sure you've thought this through. It would be great to put a number, though, on, like, the anticipated upkeep. I just had written down for gas, staffing it, maybe it would be good just to kind of have that context, insurance and maintenance. And then if you could, since you said it would be like a quick thing, you might as well just throw that longevity projection in there. I've written down that you said probably between 5 and 20 years, but maybe just to add like a kind of a slide with like, here's kind of some of the numbers that we can anticipate right off the bat, because that'll help us kind of assess and kind of move this forward, in years to come. So I'm wondering if you could, okay, so I've written down just a couple of things. If we are using access as a metric, how does that metric change when we're back in school? Like, so are we, because I feel like after school hours, I can't remember now, the community eligibility provision doesn't matter, right? Because I think it's only for breakfast and lunch. So could you speak a little bit to how once we're fully back in session, kids are in buildings, things are kind of pre-COVID, hopefully back to normal. What metric are we going to use to evaluate the success and the purpose of the food truck?
Right. So I think I've heard this come up a couple times, so I want to make sure we're clear on something. The metric that we're using is participation. I mean, it would be very difficult to measure, each individual student if they came to the truck or if they were going to get meals delivered. It's really truly about the count of the students that are coming to the truck. So, for example, I know in February, pre-COVID, we were serving about 70% of the students lunch. So our anticipation is that we would increase, truly on the top, increase those 1,000 meals. I think we can reach more students by being more available to them and creating another atmosphere so that they can come and join us for lunch and for breakfast. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I think that came up from a couple different, and I hadn't said a number yet, and so I just wanted to make sure that's clear. We know what the number is. We know what our participation is, and I think that's a very easy metric for us to measure the success of how many additional students. It's not just diverting them from the lunchroom so that they come outside. This is hopefully in anticipation, whether they're going out to their vehicles or, they wouldn't have otherwise joined us. It's to, increase access and promote the program and grow the participation. And now I've talked so long, I forgot your question. I'm so sorry.
No, I was just, that's really helpful because that actually kind of answered kind of helped me form my train of thought there. So that makes sense. And I just want to summarize back. So in a nutshell, let's say in a post-COVID situation, the purpose of having the food truck is kind of, part of it is we know that it's going to be overall more beneficial to our students' health to expand, kind of entice them to participate more in the food service offerings versus like going up to, Burger King or Taco Bell. That's one piece of it, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's part of it. And then, so I'm just trying to think long term, because I think you've made really clear the benefits of the COVID situation, and I appreciate that. So like the long-term goal then is we're going to increase enticing students to like participate in a healthier, exciting lunch program. And then it's going to be measured then by number of students. Because one of the questions that I'd written down that I think is a moot point now was for the full board presentation to ask if you could kind of like take what our current access is and see like how you're projecting it to expand. But maybe like, is there room for that though? Like with both during COVID and beyond COVID, is there room to kind of project forward like how much more access do you anticipate we're going to be able to provide, or is that too premature, or am I off base here?
No, I think we can absolutely do that because I think all of us here know that COVID being here and then post-COVID, our participation is significantly different based on the availability and ability for us to deliver meals to those homes. So we understand that. And so what those numbers are, we can better identify, if Beth Ann had just mentioned that, if we're at 70% right now, pre and post COVID, we can identify what we want that percentage to get to. And then obviously our numbers as they currently constitute during COVID, we can present that as well. We're at X percent and we anticipate the additional food trucks would get us to a different percent. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. So it sounds like I'm a kind of a summarizer. So I think there's a few kind of data points I think that board members have shared that we're going to look for in the full board presentation. It sounds like you kind of have your bases covered, so that's awesome. And my last clarification I wanted to make, I'm curious, somebody had brought up opportunity costs. Have all the considerations been made for how we can utilize Fund $50 to make sure that we're prepared for a COVID situation where we're going back in person? For example, we just finished approving costs for different seating and lunchroom kind of stuff, right? So that's pretty expensive. Have we thought through, like, do we need to maybe purchase extra seating so we could spread kids out more? Plexiglass between meals, have those things already been considered? And if not, like, do you see these, like, using the funds this way and taking away from any potential spending we would have to do to ensure student and staff safety for COVID?
Those are excellent points, Board Member Miller. We have actually taken a lot of those into consideration and already have made those processes. We actually have bought all the bento boxes already for our elementary schools, and they're actually kind of cool. If you ever want to come by and see them, they're in my office, but they're green and gray so that you can have cold and hot, you know what's going in there, and they have really nice snap lids that keep them separate. Some of that flexible seating that they're talking about allows us to distance our students a little more, lets us have flexibility to put them in hallways if we need to, the sanitization of them because it's keeping them less sitting next to each other on those big long picnic tables that you're used to seeing in a cafeteria. So we have definitely taken those into consideration. Also on the projects we did hand washing stations and sneeze guards. All of those are listed on those 2020 probably projects, and we have already done most of those projects.
Thank you. And I think you had spoken to that in a previous presentation. I just wanted to make sure to contextualize because I know there's a concern about are we spending our dollars in the best possible way? And so thank you very much for entertaining that question.
I did have a couple more questions. So first of all, the food truck itself, I mean, I'm assuming that, and maybe this is something that other districts have found out, once they get them, there's all sorts of other options that are available. As I was listening to some of the comments, perhaps if we do have some students, hypothetically speaking, and we do deliver, I mean, obviously if they're going to deliver 100 or 180 meals to a school, they have to prep that truck ahead of time, which is going to take some time. But if they know the route, if they know, is there a way, I'm guessing it could be potentially where maybe there could be a path where on the way there's a group of students or homes that we can deliver stuff to. I mean, I'm assuming everything is on the table when it comes to that. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. So in the presentation, I had identified the 5 locations on each side that I felt were the most appropriate based on the clusters, but that's not landlocked in that those are the only locations. Everything, obviously, we can create a committee and help identify those places or make additional stops if necessary. Absolutely.
Okay. And then I guess this one might be for Ms. Armstrong, but if this money is not spent on these food trucks, how would this money be spent this year?
To be honest, at this point, there isn't another project that I can get accomplished before June 30th because we have redone renovations in our cafeterias. We've been doing our kitchens, finding contractors that will work to do any outside. And I don't want to redo a kitchen that we just redid 2 years ago. So in essence, if these are not something that the board and the community want to support, most likely these funds would be returned to the state and federal programs.
Thank you. All right, hearing a lot of good discussion. Appreciate the comments and the feedback from both of you and Ms. Armstrong as well, we appreciate that. We need to get as much information as possible so that we can make informed decisions. With all that being said, are we going to entertain a motion on this, or?
I'd like to make, so jump in if I do this wrong, but I'd like to make a motion to approve the food truck proposal, to recommend it for approval to the full board, with the data points, the additional data points that we requested in this discussion. Is that something that I can do?
Sure, you can. And then also
Cool.
make sure we include the dollar amount and where it's coming from.
Right, would you like me to list those so that we're all on the same page? And then if I miss anything,
Yes,
other board
please.
members or folks can, okay, so what I have written down for the additional data points include, I'll just summarize into carrying costs, so gas, staff, if that's an issue, insurance and maintenance, the longevity of the projected or anticipated longevity of the truck. I believe we talked about current access numbers versus projected increased access numbers. Let me see, and I feel like there was something else, but that's what I've written down. Does that sound
That's what we have.
complete? Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in with anything I may have missed?
So, I mean, the only other thing was we were looking for examples of plans like outside of food service, some examples from other districts that was brought up. So I have that written down as well.
Correct.
Yep.
Oh, yes, actually, yeah, that was my other thing. Yeah, that includes the potential for community partnerships, right? Because you had already addressed that by talking about anybody who's got a license, right, could utilize the truck or whatever.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Board Member
So
Levy?
I'll just restate that motion because I just talked through it. But so I guess in summary, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of the food truck project to the full board, including the additional data points that we had listed.
Yeah. Do you want to expand on that motion, or can I amend it? In friendly
Go for it.
amendment in the amount of $410,000 from Fund 50?
I knew I forgot something important. Thank you.
That's okay. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We do have one other question. Board Member Levy?
Thank you, Chairman Wong. I would just ask that the presenters would listen back to the tape to make sure that everything that was requested is included in the presentation so we're all on the same page and we're clear that nothing was missed. Thank you.
Did you get that? I couldn't hear anything over here.
Yeah, I think she just asked us to re-listen to this to make
Okay.
sure that we covered everything, and we will absolutely take care of that.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Correct. Thank you so much.
There was a loud motorcycle outside. Okay. All right, we have motion on the table. Any more comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving to recommend to the full board the approval of the purchase of 2 food trucks with the additional data points as we outlined before in the amount of $410,000 from Fund 50, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you very much for your presentation and
Thank you.
all your help.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We have the 2020-2021 preliminary budget. And Ms. Armstrong will begin to discuss this. I know her and I had some discussion beforehand as well. For those that are following along, this information was just put out there, was it this afternoon or today? This is a preliminary. This is not the final budget. But there's a lot of information that's being put forth on this. And I know Ms. Armstrong spent a lot of time doing that. I know she had talked about that and wanting to get as much information ahead of time, but also limited amounts of time.
Yes, thank you for having me and understanding that this has been a very unique year. And I do regret that this is our first opportunity to really talk about the budget for 2021. The national crisis has definitely changed some priorities, and we need to focus our time definitely on the situation of the district right now for our budget.
Do you want to project? You're not projecting on.
I don't know. Brett was saying this is what they would see.
There you go. Your window.
It's good.
Can you?
So you guys could see everything? Okay.
Okay.
So he didn't want me to do that one. That's what I was trying to check with that. I'm sorry. So as we get into the 2021 preliminary budget, there were some basic assumptions and factors that I wanted to make sure we had attention to starting out. They are things that we have talked about over the years. The first and most prevalent is our declining membership, which is our declining student count. So our aid and our revenue limits are set by our 3-year average student counts. And the 3-year average for the 2021 year is being projected at 6,741. Last year, it was set at 7,009. So you do see quite a drop in our membership count, which affects that declining enrollment for calculating our aid. I went ahead and put the counts that we have that make up that average. This year for 2021, I am using the lower number, the 6,421 in the preliminary counts, because I want to present the worst case scenario. I am very conservative that we are hoping that we will do better, but I want us to be prepared for what the worst looks like at this point. Another factor that we had discussed last year when we were talking about the budget is last year we had a tax deferred entity close, and that is where businesses or developers get tax breaks to build and grow in our community. And once those development areas are completed, those tax incentives go away. And the district starts to receive those property taxes. The city, all of the taxing authorities do not receive those taxes until that TID is closed. Last year, we had an unexpected revenue of $1.5 million that was from that closure. And that was discussed last year as part of what saved, I should hate to say saved, but that did balance our budget with that unexpected revenue, but that does not come back again. Another factor in this year's budget is that our shared costs were down due to the COVID, which will then affect our aid. What that means is we get aided on the money we spend. And if we did not spend all of our budget last year, which we did not, and we'll get into those, it reduces the amount that we will get aided on because we didn't, in essence, use those funds. The last part is salary increases that were used in this. The professional educators had an approved compensation model last year that guarantees a $1,250 increase. And that is guaranteed for them each year under the plan and reevaluated after 3 years to see if it is keeping up with CPI. If it is exceeding CPI or falling under the average CPI, it would be adjusted at that point. All other categories of employment, I built in the CPI increase, which is a 1.81%. And we had a health insurance premium increase of 6%. Okay. On the next slide, we have, I'm showing just the calculation for the revenue limit authority that the district has. The state regulates how much a district can have in revenue. So the formula for that calculation is your resident membership, which was that 6741 that I talked about previously, by our per pupil amount, which is $10,031.57, plus any non-reoccurring exemptions, then adding your reoccurring exemptions for our revenue limit authority, which would equal $73,064,672. All of the figures that make up that are kind of down in the bottom. These are all our revenue limit. The only thing that will change that is our membership number at this point. When we talk about the aid getting certified, one, we're waiting for the certification of our membership, and the aid will be determined by that membership and who it's funded from. That is where our mill rate and our taxes come into play, is that we either get the money from aid or we get them from taxes. So the limit is the limit that we have to generate as revenue. Okay. I just wanted to highlight really quick what has happened with our membership. So if you look at this slide here, you can see we had a membership in 2009 and 10 at 7,156. And we had periods of reductions, and then we had quite a growth in the 2014-15 timeframe when our counts went up to 7,372. As we've discussed multiple times in multiple years now, we have a substantial declining enrollment at this point. And we've got to start addressing those declining enrollments because we all know there's new schools coming, new opportunities, but this problem is not resulting from those factors. This has been a problem in this district before any other schools come on. Okay. The calculation for the state equalization aid is taking our revenue limit, which was the 73 million I just spoke about, and then looking at our state equalization aid and the high poverty aid that we receive in our area. Those are down here on the bottom is our projections. And then that is what leaves us with what we can actually tax at. So our taxes for a tax levy is about $4 million at this point. We're seeing that our aid is being projected at this point as being decreased $103,000. Again, I want to preface this again, that all of these things will change on October 15th when all of our aid is certified. So these are best guesses, and these are very conservative. I want to look at the worst case scenario so that we hopefully get better news on the 15th. And this is taking into account that we also have our equalized property values. We have had increases in our property values, which is wonderful for our area. Last year we had a 9.1% growth, and this year's equalized value went up 8.2%. So although that is great that our property values are going up, it also contributes to your aid. As our values go up, the value of what property and what the state feels that people can pay goes up with that property value. And then the membership again talks about how we get that average. It's taking the September 2018, September 2019, and September 2020 counts that are reported to DPI on the third Friday, and also looks at our summer school FTEs. And then, as I mentioned, the spending prior year was decreased due to COVID. Okay, as far as our tax levy impact when we're looking at the aid that we are looking at, the total levy, and this includes our debt, as far as our referendum debt and our non-referendum debt in Funds 38 and 39, our entire tax levy is estimated at $17,585. with a mill rate going down to $10.12. So it is an $18 decrease based on a $100,000 home, and that's just the easiest calculation to do. A person would be paying $1,012 in taxes per year on a $100,000 home versus $1,030. So we do see that the mill rate continues to go down. And I just highlighted the years that we had the revenue limit energy exemption, where we did projects to our schools to improve their efficiencies. That option is no longer available until the state reaffirms that program. It was discontinued when Scott Walker left the governor's office. Okay. Wanted to kind of explain some of our revenue sources for 2020. And so we are anticipating in our general fund to receive revenues of about $88.99 million. And in our special ed, Fund 27, about $15.85 million, for a total revenue source of our operatings at $104,850,000. Some people like tables, some people like graphs. So I have this same slide after here showing in a pie graph of what those percentages of where we get our money from. So as you can see, 86% of our money is coming from state sources. That is our state aid and our high poverty aid, as well as the equalization. 8% of our income is coming from federal sources, and 5% is coming from our local taxpayers. Okay. Ooh, I skipped a bunch. This is the same graph now for the special education fund. 68% of that, the transfer, is the Fund 10 transfer to Fund 27. So, try to explain this the best way. The general operating fund has to subsidize any shortfalls of our special education program. So as we get more aid for special ed, what that does not cover and we do maintenance of effort on, the operating budget of Fund 10 provides those. So that the expenditures and the revenues for Fund 27 always balance at zero. There is no fund balance because it comes into the operating costs. Okay. The rest of the funding for special ed comes from state and federal dollars. It is important to note that in these preliminary presentations, not all of our grants are in here. So our revenues and our expenditures are balanced within our grants right now. So if we have staff or purchases that have already been made out of our federal or state grant dollars, the revenues have been balanced to that figure as we get our allocations. It's the same process that we follow every year at this point until we get those full allocation dollars. Okay. So just as I showed you where we get our money from, I wanted to show where we spend our money. When we talk about operating budgets, it's really talking about Fund 10 and Fund 27, because as we know, Fund 50 can only be used for food service. You have Fund 21, which is fundraising and donations. You have some fiduciary funds in our OPEB and our student activities. Those are not in our levy, and those are not, well, the debt is in our levy, but any fiduciary funds we are not levying for. So when we talk about operating, we're just primarily talking about Fund 10 and Fund 27. So we are spending about 43% of our budget on salaries, with another 20% in our benefits. So averaging a little over 63% of our budget into salary and benefits is well within the norm for an operation of our size. You can see that we're spending 18.94% on purchase services, and then smaller amounts, of course, in our capital and non-capital expenses, those would be your supplies and materials as well as technology or capital expenditures. 10% of our budget is that transfer to Fund 27. Okay, and again, I have a little pie chart so that you can see it more visual for those that like the pictures. You're seeing 44% of your salaries, your benefits, purchase services. Just gives you a visual look at it as well. Okay, so as we were talking about our fund balance, as I indicated that we did not spend all of our money, all of our budget last year, and our income from our taxes, you will see the trend with our fund balance has gradually been going up every year until 18-19, where it dropped slightly. Last year, at the close of 19-20, we had underspent by $2 million, which added that $2 million to our fund balance, putting us at 22.57% of our general expenditures. For that reason, we have a very healthy fund balance at this point, more than most districts. And much like other districts, we are looking at a shortfall for this year, which if we adopt a budget with a deficit, right now it's projected, like I said, worst case scenario, at $3.2 million deficit budget, that would bring our fund balance down to $16 million, which puts us at a 17.42%. According to our board policy, for our fund balance, we strive to be within 14 to 25% as a school district, and anything under 14% requires that we start looking at other ways to supplement that fund balance. So we are still within our range of where we should be at this point. Okay, this is just kind of a historical look at our mill rate and what has happened with our mill rate over the years. You'll notice in 14-15 we were at $11.56 per $1,000 of home. We stayed consistent and then dropped down to $9.73. And with the referendum passing and RLEE, we had, no, that wasn't the referendum, I apologize. That was your RLEE projects. We went back up to $11.54 and $11.73. We have been decreasing that mill rate over the last 2 years, trying to bring it into a steady line with what we would anticipate our mill rate to be. Okay. The budget publication documents that were attached, those will be published in the paper after we have the meeting today. Those will be sent out to the paper for publication. As long as they were published by the 13th, they said if we had them to them Friday, that would make it. We have to have a 15-day publication notice. I anticipate these will be sent to them tomorrow and could be published as early as Friday for us. And there will be copies of this presentation and the budget publication document, both on our website after this evening. Don't go to the link right now because you'll see last year's proposal. They're putting this one out tomorrow morning. Ooh, just pulled the cord out. And they can also be picked up here. We'll have them in the vestibule if anyone wants a hard copy paper. Okay, I know I went through a lot and threw a lot at you, so I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Once again, this is just the preliminary information, and this is for information purposes only at this time, and I'm sure all of us are going to get in-tuned and educated on a lot of budget items. So at this time, any questions from committee members? Ms. Miller?
Hi, did we miss Ms. Jacobs? Or are we good?
Go ahead. I'll catch up with her. She'll go next.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I noticed that in the, like early on in the slides, we had looked at the spending, like you kind of explained, like with CPI. Is there room in the preliminary budget for anything with like, I guess a twofold question, both with longevity pay and also is there room to support like grow your own? I assume that would be a fun. I appreciate the information because I'm still trying to get all this straight. I think that would be Fund 10. Like if we were going to maybe support our teachers' professional growth as part of a grow your own. Is there room for that in this budget?
Well, right now, this budget is a $3.2 million shortfall. So anything that we add to this would be increasing the use of fund balance. I did anticipate that you would ask questions about longevity because that has been a long-standing. I did not build it in, but I do have cost estimates. And they will range from a first year, depending, I did 3 different scenarios. It could be anywhere from an additional 119,000 up to 239.5. And I just went ahead and projected that out as well. That each year as we continue, because we are encouraging retention, we want to keep our staff. If we kept all the staff we have, by 2022-23, those costs would go up to 160,000 to 320,000, and going as far as 180,000 in 2023-24 to 360,000. So longevity is definitely something that we can continue to talk about, but those would be in addition to that deficit budget that we have already put forward.
That is so helpful. I really appreciate that. I just had one other question that's maybe if this is too much or if you could direct me to a resource. I'm curious, and the reason I'm asking this is in anticipation of us eventually, well, hopefully sooner rather than later, starting our strategic planning process. I love how you broke down kind of like, okay, this is like the percentage of Fund 10, the percentage of Fund 27. And I think that as we continue to have meetings like this and try and get those definitions and that information out to the public, there's more community transparency and understanding kind of like how all this works. And I'm thinking about planning for a strategic plan. Would it be possible maybe for like the regular board presentation or maybe like a little further out down the line just to see how our current breakdown compares to other districts that are perhaps comparable size or demographics?
Absolutely. And I know DPI does have on their dashboard their fundings and their annual reports. Those are all being certified at this point. So when we present our audit, usually that's in late December, early January because of the holidays. Those will then be published on DPI site so you can drill down as well. But we do have some resources to tools where I can do some of that comparison for us and present that at any point with the board as well.
I really appreciate that. And I think I mean, it's always good to know, right? But I think especially as we kind of gear up to like, you know, what are some changes and some foundational things we need to look at, I think it really helps us as a board kind of understand like kind of where things fall right now and where things maybe could go. Yep. So my last question, if that's okay, speaking to the point of transparency and public input, there's still a lot of challenges for people to come to meetings in person because of COVID and other circumstances. I'm wondering, are we doing anything extra or could we maybe do something extra this year to make sure that, you know, this is going to go out in the paper. I'm sure people are going to have a lot of opinions. What can we do maybe to make sure that we're facilitating that public kind of hearing or public input piece that we would normally do in person for our budget this year?
Well, absolutely. The budget hearing, of course, will take place on Wednesday, the 28th. When we put this preliminary budget presentation out on the website tomorrow morning, my email address is also on that website. I would welcome, and I've welcomed board members, I welcome community, come in. Either we can do a virtual conversation with Google Hangouts or Zoom, whatever works. I am happy to talk these numbers with anybody who wants to, because although I don't like the financial outlook that we're at as a district, this is really kind of what I get into, and I'm a data geek, and it's fun. So if people have questions, I always have my door open, virtually or in person, if they would like to talk with us.
I really appreciate that you extended that out there, and I'm hopeful, just to be respectful of your time, because you have a lot of very important work to do. I think it's great that you want to make time to talk to people one-on-one, and I would encourage you to do so. I'm wondering, do you think that, and I guess this is maybe more of a Monica question, I wonder if there's something like, if we could kind of like, either through a Google form so the board could kind of see what questions are coming in, maybe we could put some kind of like a comment piece or a question and comments piece out on the website specific to the budget or something like that, just because I think that as we prepare ourselves for the October 28th meeting, I think it would be really helpful for us as a board to understand kind of like what sorts of issues are coming up, just because there's so many things going on right now with like distance learning. You know, that might not be the first thing that a community member thinks to talk to the board about, but I think it would be really helpful for the administration and for us to have kind of a clear view of kind of what people are curious about, concerned about, or ideas or thoughts that they have. Is that something that we could maybe put on that? You said it'll be on the website by your email address. Is there like a space you could do that, you know?
Yeah, I can work with Monica for the remainder of this week and get something out there. It probably won't be available right tomorrow, but we will have both the publication, not only in the paper, but that publication will be on the website as well as the presentation. You can actually go on our website. We have all the audited financials and prior presentations of board budgets. So that resource, I know a lot of people don't like to get into those numbers, but it is all out there on the business side of the School District of Beloit website. But I will have them look at something if we can put a feedback, and maybe we can include it in the weekly letter from Dr. Keyser on Sunday saying that the budget preliminary was presented, and here's where you can go and look at it and address questions. That's a great idea.
That would be great. I mean, everybody's got a really extra full plate right now just because of everything that's going on in the world. And this is so important. I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can, you know what I mean, for that transparency and just that community input. So I really appreciate you entertaining that. I think those are great ideas. So thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a few questions. One of them, and I think what Board Member Miller had mentioned, I think would be helpful, but also I think if there's ways to simplify things, you know, the budget, I've been working with this for the last couple of years, and it's still, and I'm pretty good in finances, and this is still very confusing, and I continue to learn. But even if there's a way to define some of the terminology that we have, I think that could be extremely useful. I mean, I could tell you that, you know, I never knew about these different funds that we had available, and I think just even if you had a definition of them so that people can understand when we have Fund 80 or Fund 50 or Fund 10, that we can say this is specifically what we receive, or what the source of this is from, and also what it can be used for. Because I think that people, the general public, a lot of times believes that, you know, we just have this big pot of money, $108 million, and we can just spend it freely however we want to. And that's far, far from the truth.
Right.
But also, I think what the public doesn't understand is that there's the vast amount of funding that we receive from federal and state taxpayers.
Yeah.
This is not a rich base for taxpayers. I mean, as far as, and that's because of the equalization aid and all of that. But I think that if there's ways to explain that, and if this could be put in some simple format, I think what I've often done, or what in my job, I've tried to simplify things, bringing it down to very, I guess, you know, what do they say? Explain it in a way that a fifth grader can learn
Yep.
or understand it.
Yep.
And if we can do that, it's going to really alleviate a lot of questions that would be arising. The questions would be answered there. And if they didn't get the questions, they can say, well, we can refer to that. There's a lot of good information, simplified, that can help them to understand that.
Yep.
Getting my question, sorry for that rant there. The healthcare premiums going up by 6%. Has this been normal every year?
No, we have not. I've actually fought with the actuaries and not increased our rates because we haven't had an increase in our health premiums in 4 years because we have continued to do very well in our program. We actually have $1.9 million in restricted fund balance for our health because we're self-insured. And so this was the first year that we did take an increase in our premiums. And it's just the cost of healthcare is rising exponentially. And we had to address it at some point, and we did not increase the contributions by our staff members. So we did increase the contributions in the dollar amount, but we kept the percentage of what they pay the same. So they saw an increase in what they pay, but no difference in percentages.
With the, you had referred to in your pretty pie graphs and charts and everything else, the 20%, I believe it was, that is made up of benefits, and that's for, is that broken down equally for retirement and health care, or does it include vacation pay and everything else? I mean, what percent of that, do we have a breakdown of that?
We do, and I can provide that to you. In your monthly financials, we break that out. So those benefits are WRS retirement, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, dental insurance, vision, short-term disability, long-term disability, life insurance. I mean, it's a lot. It does include some. I want to double check that.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
But yeah, it isn't just health insurance,
Right.
what's making up 20%.
And even, if there's been substantial increases in any one of those areas, that would, I think it'd be good information to know, because you had brought up that 63, or benefits, salaries and benefits makes up 63% of our budget currently. And you'd said that that's normal for most districts of our size, or maybe as a whole. So what is not normal? I mean, is there a break at 64, 65, 69? What's that number?
No, typically, and I can get you some data on that, but typically most organizations about our size they're considered to be healthy as long as they're not over 70 to 72% of their budget being salary and benefits.
Okay.
Okay, and I did want to speak real quick, just to your question. I love the idea of a quick reference, but there is a document on my website that's the budget manual that does identify all of the funds and the purposes and everything within our budget. But I know nobody wants to read that document because it's probably about 60 pages. So I think a quick reference is there, but if anybody did want to get into the nitty-gritty, I have condensed the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Reporting Guidelines, which is the WUFR, into our budget manual that is to all of our sites to know how to do that.
That sounds like an exciting.
Exciting nighttime reading.
Yeah. A couple of other questions here. One, you had, and none of these are in any order, and hopefully it'll help to address some questions that from later on. You had mentioned the fund balance that we have. Right now we have, 22, or...
Yeah, 22% of our operating costs.
22% at 19 million. So that amount you talked about, you showed an illustration here saying if we took basically the full deficit this year, I'm assuming, that you have already earmarked, which is not finalized, that if we took it all from fund balance, we would take our fund balance, the percentage, down to 17%. But that number is a number we can adjust, or we can adjust in many different ways, because I was doing the math on this to say, if we took it down to 20%, that would leave us, we would have to reduce fund balance down to, let's say, 17 million. And then we would have, maybe it would be cuts or other things like that. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one, and this kind of goes into it as well, because, when you start to see these cuts, there's, 268 bodies that we, on the rolling average, or the leveling. And as you had mentioned, we have a lot of competition, and the numbers are going to probably widen from there, which doesn't bode well for us. And besides stopping the bleeding, which is the obvious, what else really can we do? I mean, these averages are going to continue to come down, but I'm assuming it's going to be a matter at some point of staff cutting, layoffs, and things like that, or?
What we've been kind of throwing around and talking in general as we started pulling this together I do have a tool now that is our Baird forecasting program that I'm going to already be working on looking at our 3 and 5 year projections out there. Dr. Keyser and I are both kind of data people. We like to look at that, so that's part of our plan. But I think a big component of this is looking at our strategic plan and putting in systems and processes that would, I don't want to immediately say, hey, we're going to start laying off, we're going to cut people. But I think as we define our strategic plan and we look at our processes, I think that we have efficiencies we can take advantage of within the district that aren't necessarily at that opportunity right now for the 2021, but with someone and the district and the board open to looking at that strategic plan and those processes, we would be able to move forward.
Thank you for that information. And I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that if you do see a decline, that means that there should be, if we don't have any cuts, there's more resources available for all those that are left behind.
Yes.
And if this number decreased by, hypothetically speaking, another 500 students, which is probably, I wouldn't say it's the target that a group has, but I mean, that very well could be the case. Yep. We need to be prepared for that. It's not really a one-for-one loss when it comes to that, because we have to be looking at that and saying, okay, if we don't need as many staff members because we've lost 800 students, so you take that, divide it by, I don't know, pick a number 30 per classroom. Yep. I mean, you could start to look at that to say there's some ways that we can reduce or consolidate.
Yes, and that are some of the efficiencies that
Right.
we would be looking at. I'm just not comfortable at this point saying, hey,
Right.
we're going to start cutting jobs, because that's not what we are even talking about for 2021. But part of our strategic plan will be looking at efficiencies, both at the step, when that makes up over 60% of your budget, that's where you have to look at what you're doing and how you can address those concerns.
You like efficiencies because it sounds so much nicer.
Yeah, I know.
No, thank you for that information, and I certainly agree with you wholeheartedly. We don't want to put a fear out there that there's going to be big layoffs and all of that, because I think that we have to be smart about this and understand that these are, obviously the human beings that we're working with. We want to be very careful about how we handle that. So,
Can I make one more statement?
Absolutely.
That I didn't have this in here, but I did want to highlight, because I know it's a topic of conversation. The $3 million of CARES money that the district has received, which is the COVID response money. The district has earmarked that money right now, just so you have an idea what we've been doing. We have purchased over 1,600 Chromebooks for our students. We have purchased iPads, laptops, updating the computers. We have hotspots on order. We are continuing with PPE. If students are returning, we have masks and face shield. We have a lot of those things. That money has been earmarked. Unfortunately, we're in the same situation as the whole nation, and that getting those supplies in are waiting. All of the Chromebooks and the iPads and laptops are expected to be in mid-October. So if you look at the date today, I'm waiting any day that those come and we can put those in some students' hands.
Thank you for that last information. I think it's extremely valuable for all of us to understand that through this, while there have been a lot of challenges, and even financially, that there is some aid that has come through for us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your work and all the hard work over the last few months. This is what you like to do, which is great, because you're in the right spot. Are there any other comments or questions from committee members or board members?
I put one in the chat, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I didn't know if that was earlier or later. So go ahead, Board Member Miller.
No, sorry, I should have. Yeah, no, it's okay. Couple of things that just came up in this conversation. I had three points that don't need to be fully fleshed out, but maybe just things to consider for the October 28th presentation. I'm concerned when I hear about Chair Wong, with the reducing staff as we're shrinking student population, just because class size is something that I think we had discussed at one point, but that's not a whole discussion to have right now. But I just want to throw out there that I'm hopeful that in our planning, we're also planning to kind of reduce or keep class size down, because we will be coming back to school at some point, and I want to make sure that we have an optimal learning environment for our kids. So it's just kind of a comment. The two questions that I had that I'm hoping that we can address maybe on the 28th are there other creative solutions that we could explore, if not in this budget, perhaps in the future, to do something about healthcare costs for our staff and faculty? Just because I know, like with, I mean, we're in a global health crisis. I think that's kind of a hot topic item right now. So I'm curious. You know, you've always found some really kind of creative ways to address that. I'd love to hear you give some context or perspective on, like, you know, what other options might be available, or maybe just what's been exhausted, so that folks know that we're like really in depth exploring that concern. The other piece was looking, I think you did this last year to an extent. I found it really helpful if we could identify in the budget pieces that potentially could be, or I guess like the role in which grant funds play. I know you touched on that earlier, but when we're talking about these really large numbers, like I think it's helpful to have context as a board, and I'm assuming as a community too, to know that, well, here's where some of that give could go, right? Like if we're spending, you know, X amount on this service that we need for our students, if we were to receive this grant, it would free up maybe X dollars to put toward, you know, Y, right? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I know you touched on that. I think that's something that our community and our board would like some context on, so that we can make good decisions again and have that in mind as we prepare for a strategic plan.
Absolutely, and I appreciate those contexts. As we were talking about that, I realize that we always talk about the budget and the preliminary and the adoption and say that we haven't got all our allocations in here yet and that we're balanced. That brings up an excellent opportunity for me to share that information with you when we do budget adjustments, and actually give you the presentation that shows all of our grant allocations. So that's a great idea, and I will take that into consideration. It won't be on the October 28th though, because we won't have the allocation still at that point.
Right. So I apologize for my misunderstanding of the timeline, but yeah, I just remember last year you sort of touched on it at the big presentation. You're like, we'll kind of know later, and I thought that was so helpful, just to help people understand. And you know, I know that, you know, budgets are terrifying, they're intimidating, they're hard to understand, and you're talking about jobs, right? And supports for our kids. It's like the most important stuff, like all kind of comes to the surface. So I think softening that with helping people understand that there are different income sources and there's room for creativity, I think helps, and I really appreciate you speaking to that.
Okay, and I actually, and I'm going to kind of take a counterpoint to that, and don't take this in the wrong way, but I also think that we need to be aware and make our employees be aware as well of rich benefits that we do have. Because I know, working in this field of financial planning as individuals and knowing what I pay for my health care, and granted, I know we hear those stories back and forth, but I think it's important to understand the comparison, whether it's to not necessarily private industry, but also other districts as a whole, to determine, okay, yes, here's where our benefits are, and are we in a rich plan, or do we have some room to be creative?
And that's a great segue for me to reiterate, those of you that have been on the board for a year or more with me, you heard me talk about this last year, that one of my goals was to get total compensation letters out to people so they understood salary and benefits, what they truly are getting as district employees. I am hopeful now that we hopefully will have some stability, and that is a project that Tanya Williams and Wendy LaPointe and I can work on and get that process going.
I would love to see that.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from board member or committee members? Okay, I think we're all good here. Thank you very much for your time and effort on that. And we look forward. Well,
did Spencer have a question?
Spencer, did you have a question?
I was just going to say that with me being relatively new yet, there's going to be a small learning curve with this. So I really appreciate kind of taking this moment to just kind of give us like a little snapshot of what we're going to be expecting to see. So I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. And if you want an in-depth look, I'd be happy to schedule a meeting with you so you can get a whole look at it.
I might take you up on that offer before that meeting comes around.
Perfect. Just send me an email.
And your head will be
Thank you.
spinning when you're done with that meeting. So, sorry, Board Member Anderson. I'm used to seeing people asking questions on the the video thing there. But anyways, okay. Well, thank you very much once again. And that brings us to, let's see, our next meeting. Next meeting will occur on Tuesday, November 3rd at 5:15. We've always been very consistent with that. We appreciate everybody being involved, and I like the path that we've been going on lately. It's been good. And if any board members have any items that they would like to bring forward or for us, items for attention, please refer to board docs and submit them that way. Other than that, I think that we are, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
A second?
And second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.